I'm Emily, 28, no longer a pawn in my parents' game of building an independent life. My journey began when my fashion boutique failed, a catastrophe my parents, Mary and John Thompson, orchestrated and used to label me irresponsible. To control me further, they forced me into an arranged marriage with James, a man they deemed a nobody, and relegated me to an entry-level administrative job. Our sprawling mansion was a monument to old money and new ambition, fueled by my father John's real estate empire. My mother, Mary, orchestrated our social ascent with military precision, ensuring every aspect of our lives screamed wealth and status. John dismissed it as a little project, funding it as an expensive lesson. For 3 glorious months, Atelier Emily thrived, attracting fashion editors and influencers. My business partner, Jessica, handled operations. Then, the call came. The accounts were empty, and Jessica had disappeared with our capital, leaving falsified records. The Boston Globe ran the story. Thompson heiress duped in boutique scheme. After dismissing my attempts to find work independently, John cleared his throat. Theodore Parker has been our family's attorney for decades. His associate son, James, is seeking a wife. He's willing to overlook your recent difficulties. The stranger stepped forward. He was average height, plain features, with medium brown hair, wearing a department store suit and a non-luxury watch. This is absurd. I laughed. I'm not marrying a stranger because of one business setback. Mary stated flatly, this isn't a negotiation. You'll marry James, who has generously agreed to this arrangement despite your circumstances. If I refused, I would leave with nothing. Mary added, your father's heart can't take much more stress, a heavy implication of blame. I moved through the morning in a detached haze, feeling appropriate rather than beautiful. John walked me down the aisle with a grip that felt more restraining than supportive. It was 2 bedrooms, a functional kitchen, and bland furniture Mary had selected. Home sweet home, James commented without irony. This isn't a home, I retorted, it's a holding cell. I floundered with domesticity, while James observed with surprising patience. He left early each morning for his financial consultant position, returning to find me struggling with my administrative role, a job involving coffee fetching and filing that any high school graduate could perform. Weekends, James often disappeared for business meetings that seemed excessive for his junior position. He maintained a locked home office where he took private calls in a voice that carried more authority than his supposed role warranted. My curiosity grew alongside my suspicion. Why would this unassuming man agree to marry a disgraced socialite? 50 guests, trimmed from 300, watched with pity or barely concealed schadenfreude. James waited at the altar, surprisingly composed, and squeezed my hand gently, whispering, just breathe. The reception was a blur of condescending well wishes. Mary's centerpiece gift was a deed to a starter apartment and employment contracts for entry-level positions at Thompson Enterprises. Suitable for your capabilities, John explained, emphasizing my demotion. He departed in James's Honda, no exotic honeymoon. I fled to Olivia's bedroom. They've been planning this for weeks, she admitted, explaining it was about controlling the narrative. If I married this guy and took a humble position, they could tell everyone it was a redemption story. James, she said, was a financial consultant at a small firm, whom Mary liked because he's forgettable. My younger sister, Olivia, 5 years my junior, followed my path, mimicking my moves, often undermined by Mary's casual cruelty. Until age 26, I performed flawlessly. University, MBA, and a position at my father's company awaited. He arrived in a Honda Civic, wearing the same unremarkable suit. His apartment was just as ordinary. Functional furniture, minimal decoration. I understand this isn't ideal, he said, but I think we could build something functional. When I demanded his practical reasons, his phone buzzed, and he stepped into what appeared to be a home office, his muffled voice sounding more authoritative. In desperation, I met Tyler Reed, an ex-boyfriend, hoping for another option. His calculated offer to help for Thompson connections made me realize my value had always been my family name, my connections. Without them, even former lovers saw me as damaged goods. I had the right friends and dated acceptable men. My mother hissed this where I belonged, ensuring my humiliation was complete and my life's narrative controlled. The Putnam boy is making a sacrifice accepting you with your history, she remarked. This matches where you belong now. Be grateful anyone would take you. I caught my reflection. A trapped woman in a sensible dress, about to enter a sensible marriage, fading into appropriate insignificance. Growing up as Emily Thompson in Boston's Beacon Hill meant never questioning privilege. Then, I committed the unforgivable sin. I wanted something of my own, a high-end fashion boutique. My parents' reaction was swift and merciless. Your irresponsibility has embarrassed this family, John thundered. Mary, with ice-cold eyes, added, your recklessness reflects poorly on our judgment. Within weeks, they reclaimed my apartment, canceled my credit cards, and relegated me to a guest room. Every family gathering became an opportunity to reference my failure, trotting me out as evidence that even Thompson women could fall. My Mercedes disappeared, replaced by a 10-year-old Honda. I existed in a limbo of shame, my identity dissolving. The intervention happened on a Tuesday evening. John and Mary informed me they had reached a decision regarding my future. 3 days later, I met James for an arranged dinner. The final blow came during my wedding dress fitting. Mary selected a subdued ivory sheath. My wedding day dawned with picture-perfect weather, feeling like a cosmic joke. It was a tastefully modest ceremony. Our generous wedding gift, the apartment occupied the 3rd floor of a converted factory building. Having been forced into an arranged marriage with James, a man my parents, Mary and John Thompson, meticulously portrayed as a humble financial consultant, my life felt like a carefully constructed punishment. Many watching with pity or barely concealed schadenfreude. James, to me, seemed utterly unremarkable. He was average height, with plain features and medium brown hair, consistently dressed in a department store suit and a non-luxury watch. I uncovered the shocking reality. My humble financial consultant husband, the man my parents had so dismissively labeled a nobody, was, in fact, James Parker, the reclusive billionaire founder and CEO of Aurora Investments. The most horrifying truth to emerge was that my own mother, Mary, had meticulously orchestrated the sabotage of my beloved fashion boutique. My business's financial collapse, the very event my parents used to label me irresponsible and force me into this arranged marriage, was not my fault at all. It was a calculated, deliberate plot. She was aided in this cruel scheme by my father John's business associate, William, and a professional con artist named Jessica, whose real identity was Rebecca Collins. Together, they had intentionally created the conditions for my boutique's failure. Their motive was chillingly clear: to completely discredit me, to humble me, and most importantly, to reassert absolute control over my independence and my life's narrative. The public humiliation from the Thompson-era stooped and boutique scheme headlines was a narrative they had manufactured themselves. I had been living a profound lie, not just about my husband, but about my entire recent past, orchestrated by the very people who claimed to be my family. His net worth was an astonishing $4.2 billion, a fortune that far eclipsed my own family's wealth. The man who drove a Honda Civic and lived in an ordinary apartment was a financial titan, a revelation that instantly explained the quiet authority I.e.D. sometimes glimpsed in his seemingly excessive business meetings. Mary had even commented she liked him because he's forgettable. He arrived for our arranged dates in a Honda Civic, and his apartment was just as ordinary, filled with functional furniture and minimal decoration. Our generous wedding gift from my parents was a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a converted factory building, furnished blandly by Mary herself. I famously retorted, "This isn't a home, it's a holding cell," as I floundered with domesticity, while James observed me with surprising patience. This punitive marriage, along with my demotion to an entry-level administrative job at my father's company, was their direct consequence for my fashion boutique's financial collapse. He would return to find me struggling with my demeaning administrative job, a role my father, John, explicitly stated was suitable for your capabilities. However, my curiosity began to grow alongside a deep suspicion. Weekends, James would often disappear for business meetings that seemed excessive for a junior position. He maintained a locked home office where he took private calls, his muffled voice often carrying a distinct authority that seemed far beyond his supposed role. I constantly wondered, why would this unassuming man agree to marry a disgraced socialite like me? They ruthlessly framed the failure as undeniable proof of my recklessness and irresponsibility, a calculated move to humble me and reassert total control over my life's narrative. Mary, with ice-cold eyes, even hissed that this was where I belonged, ensuring my humiliation was complete. I was a disgraced heiress, stripped of my independence, my apartment reclaimed, credit cards cancelled, and my Mercedes replaced by a decade-old Honda. Every family gathering became a public spectacle where I was trotted out as living evidence that even a Thompson woman could fall. My wedding to James was a stark reminder of my new status. A tastefully modest affair with a mere 50 guests, a fraction of our usual extravagant affairs. For 6 months, I lived this life. James would leave early each morning for his supposed financial consultant position, a role I now understand was a complete facade. Then, 6 months into our marriage, the truth exploded, shattering the meticulously crafted illusion. But the revelation of James's true identity was merely the first layer of a much deeper, far more insidious family betrayal. The shattering truth of my parents' betrayal, the meticulously crafted illusion of my business failure, and the revelation of James's true identity as James Parker, the reclusive billionaire founder and CEO of Aurora Investments, left me reeling. The man I had dismissed as a nobody, the one Mary had deemed forgettable, was, in fact, a titan. The quiet authority I had sometimes glimpsed in his muffled calls from his locked home office, the business meetings that seemed excessive for a junior consultant, all made terrifying sense. For years, she had been subjected to Mary's casual cruelty and the expectation to follow my path. When I fled to her bedroom after my parents announced the arranged marriage, she had admitted they had been planning to control the narrative for weeks. Now, as the full extent of my parents' machinations became clear, Olivia became quietly aware of the truth and began to offer her support. Her silent nods, her knowing glances, and her subtle acts of solidarity were invaluable. She didn't have to say much. Her presence and her shared understanding further solidified our alliance against our parents' suffocating control. We, the two Thompson daughters, once manipulated and undermined, were now united, quietly preparing to dismantle the very empire that sought to define us. This realization, rather than pushing me further away, actually drew me to James. We had been thrown together in a punitive marriage, but now, faced with a common enemy, my manipulative parents, an unexpected and deeply authentic partnership began to form between us. He had known all along, yet he had waited patiently for me to uncover the truth, never once shaming me for my initial ignorance. Our relationship, built on a foundation of deception from my parents, was now ironically becoming grounded in shared understanding and a mutual desire for justice. For months, I had been a pawn, suffering under the weight of fabricated irresponsibility and recklessness. He introduced me to his chief strategic officer, Sophia, whom I now know as Grace Lopez. Grace, a woman whose sharp intellect and calm demeanor immediately commanded respect, became my mentor. Under her expert guidance, I underwent intensive training in financial intelligence and corporate strategy. This wasn't some academic exercise. It was a crash course in understanding the intricate web of corporate malfeasance, a deep dive into the very mechanisms my parents had used to destroy my boutique. We dissected banking records, analyzed email trails, and pored over internal communications. Each session with Grace was a revelation, not just about finance, but about my own capabilities. She pushed me to critically analyze the evidence of my parents' scheme, helping me connect the dots and understand the full scope of their calculated plot. This rigorous training wasn't just about gathering evidence. It helped me rebuild my confidence, shattered by years of parental condescension and the public narrative of my failure. I was no longer the disgraced heiress existing in a limbo of shame. I was a woman equipping herself for battle. My mother, Mary, had orchestrated the sabotage of my beloved fashion boutique, aided by William and a con artist named Jessica, whose real identity was Rebecca Collins. The very people who claimed to love me had engineered my downfall, framed me, and forced me into a marriage to exert absolute control over my independence and life. The sting of that deception was sharper than any public humiliation. Yet, amidst the wreckage of my past, an unexpected transformation began. With the truth laid bare, James didn't hesitate. Adding another crucial layer to this burgeoning alliance was my younger sister, Olivia. The truth of my parents' deception, revealed to me by James, and the subsequent training with Grace, had transformed me from a disgraced heiress into a woman equipped with the knowledge and resolve to fight for my own narrative. My younger sister, Olivia, had silently become an ally, her quiet support reinforcing my determination. The pieces were meticulously gathered: banking records, email trails, internal communications, all the irrefutable evidence Grace and I had painstakingly analyzed, exposing my mother Mary's calculated plot to sabotage my boutique and control my life. The question was no longer if I would expose them, but when and how. Allow me to introduce you properly to my husband, James, not merely a financial consultant, but James Parker, I declared, letting his full name hang in the air for dramatic effect. The reclusive billionaire founder and CEO of Aurora Investments, with a net worth of over $4.2 billion. Gasps erupted, faces contorted in disbelief, then shock. My mother's jaw dropped, her carefully composed facade crumbling instantly. John's face went from confusion to a pale, horrified realization. The room buzzed with incredulous whispers, a tsunami of stunned reactions. The nobody they had chosen for me, the forgettable man Mary had approved, was a titan who dwarfed their own fortune. The perfect opportunity, a stage meticulously set by my parents themselves, arose at Mary and John's 35th anniversary gala. At a signal from James, screens around the ballroom flickered to life. My beloved fashion boutique didn't fail due to my recklessness or irresponsibility, I announced, as the first set of projections appeared: banking records, undeniable proof of drained accounts and fraudulent transfers. It was meticulously sabotaged. Next came emails, showing my mother, Mary, conspiring with William, my father John's business associate, and Jessica, whose real name is Rebecca Collins, a professional con artist, to intentionally create the conditions for my boutique's collapse. The internal communications, projected next, laid bare their cold, calculated motive: to discredit me, to humble me, and, most importantly, to reassert absolute control over my independence and my life's narrative. The Thompson heiress duped headlines, I explained, were a story they themselves had manufactured. This wasn't just any event. It was the ultimate showcase of their power, their carefully constructed facade of family unity. All eyes were on my parents, whose faces were a mixture of fury, betrayal, and absolute terror. Their meticulously crafted empire of lies was crumbling before their eyes. Then, I felt a gentle touch on my arm. My younger sister, Olivia, had quietly stepped onto the stage, standing defiantly by my side. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence was a powerful statement of solidarity, a public alignment with me, delivering the final, devastating blow to our mother's carefully constructed narrative of family unity. The cheers and applause that erupted weren't for my parents. They were for the truth, for the shattered facade, and for the beginning of our authentic lives and social standing. a stark contrast to my own modest, humiliating wedding just months prior. I remembered the 50 guests at my wedding, many watching with pity or barely concealed schadenfreude, and Mary's cruel words that I was where I belonged. This gala would be different. This would be my stage. As James and I entered the opulent ballroom, a sense of calm settled over me. He was, as always, by my side, a silent pillar of strength and support. The room was filled with the very people who had watched my public humiliation, the same socialites who had whispered about the Thompson-era duped and boutique scheme. My parents, oblivious, beamed from the center of the room, reveling in their manufactured success. I took a deep breath, recalling every condescending glance, every patronizing remark, every instance of casual cruelty Olivia and I had endured. The time for polite suffering was over. The moment came during the toasts. As John finished his speech, basking in the applause, I moved. With James's subtle nod, I strode purposefully towards the microphone, my heart pounding a rhythm of defiance. The murmurs died down as I took the microphone, the room's attention shifting, faces turning quizzical. My parents' smiles faltered. I looked directly at my mother, then at my father, before addressing the stunned crowd. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the ballroom. "You all know me as Emily Thompson, the daughter who failed in business, the one my parents graciously married off to a humble financial consultant." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. "But tonight," I continued, "I'm here to correct a few misconceptions. Starting with my husband." I turned, gesturing to James, who now stood beside me, his usual unassuming demeanor replaced by an undeniable aura of power. But I wasn't finished. "And now, for the truth about my failure," I said, my voice gaining strength. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by a few muffled exclamations of shock. The deafening silence that followed Olivia's defiant presence by my side at the gala was quickly replaced by a cacophony of stunned whispers and then, unexpectedly, applause. It wasn't from my parents. It was a raw, visceral reaction to the truth, to the spectacular implosion of a carefully constructed lie. The next few days were a blur of hushed phone calls, frantic attempts by my parents to contain the fallout, and a relentless media frenzy. But unlike before, the narrative was no longer theirs to control. We fully transitioned into our authentic life together in his actual penthouse residence. I was no longer the disgraced heiress existing in a limbo of shame. After her powerful public alignment with me at the gala, Olivia, with our steadfast support, gained her own independence. This collective liberation symbolized a new beginning for both of us, where we could define our own paths. The chains of familial control had been shattered, and we, the Thompson daughters, were finally free to forge lives built on authenticity, choice, and genuine purpose. Supported by James and empowered by the financial intelligence and corporate strategy training with Grace, I successfully re-established my fashion career. I poured my energy and passion into opening a new boutique, this time based on sustainable practices. It wasn't merely a business. It was a defiant reclaiming of the dream my parents had dismissed as a little project and then systematically sabotaged. This new venture was entirely my own, built on principles I believed in, a symbol of my authentic independence and renewed purpose. It was a stark contrast to the holding cell of the two-bedroom apartment Mary had selected for us, a place I had once described as not a home. His penthouse, not merely luxurious, felt like a sanctuary, a space where our relationship could finally flourish, founded on mutual respect and shared values, free from deception or control. James, no longer the unremarkable man in a department store suit and a Honda Civic, but the man of quiet authority I had sometimes glimpsed in his locked home office, was now openly by my side, a partner in every sense of the word. Our connection deepened with every shared moment of truth and defiance. News of James Parker, the reclusive billionaire founder and CEO of Aurora Investments, and his quiet marriage to the disgraced heiress Emily Thompson, dominated headlines. The irony was delicious. The nobody they had chosen for me, the forgettable man Mary had approved, was a titan whose wealth dwarfed their own. The gala, intended as a monument to my parents' enduring success, had instead become the stage for their public undoing. The projected evidence, banking records, emails, and internal communications proving their calculated plot to destroy my business and independence wasn't just a spectacle. It was tangible proof that led to regulatory inquiries into their business practices. Their social standing, once unassailable, dissolved into widespread condemnation and mockery. The very socialites who had once watched my wedding with pity or barely concealed schadenfreude now looked upon my parents with disdain. The tables had truly turned. The control they had so desperately clung to, the life's narrative they had forced upon me, slipped irrevocably from their grasp. Mary and John, their faces contorted in a mixture of fury and terror, watched their meticulously crafted empire of lies crumble before their very eyes. The immediate aftermath was chaotic, yet liberating. The carefully crafted public image of the Thompson family shattered into 1,000 pieces. The public revelation of the gala had far-reaching consequences for Mary and John. For James and me, the gala marked a true beginning. With the weight of my parents' manipulation lifted, I finally had the space to reclaim my own identity and purpose. Perhaps one of the most fulfilling outcomes was seeing my younger sister, Olivia, finally break free from our mother's casual cruelty and the pressure to mimic my path.